Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kevin Kell. I'm an alumnus of Emory, 75 Oxford College, 77 Emory College. I'm also the Alumni Association staff liaison to Emory Atlanta 60 Plus Network. We started this network a little over a year ago, and it's been hugely successful. And during the pandemic, this group of folks um, mounted 14 digital presentations on everything from estate planning to how to draw to social events and what have you. And we're looking forward to having just as many events this coming year, and hopefully some of those will be in person. Thank you for joining us today for Emory Explores, Atlanta History Center Veterans History Project. This is presented by 60 Plus Network and also the Emory Veterans Network. I want to take a moment to introduce John Lilly, who is an alumnus as well, 67 College. And he is a retired lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Air Force. He became involved with this project a few years ago, and he made the introduction to Sue Verhoff, our presenter today. And this has a very special place in his heart. So I'm going to turn this over to John. Again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you at future events. John?
Thanks, Kevin. It's my great pleasure to introduce Sue Verhoff, who's the Director of Genealogy and Oral History at the History Center. I met Sue several years ago in the Emory OLLI program, the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. And Sue did a class on genealogy. And as part of the class, she introduced to us the Veterans History Project. After that day of class, I went up to her and said, Sue, I'd really like to do an interview. How do I do that? And so she helped me through that, and I did my interview. And after that, I was really very impressed with it. After that, I pestered her until she said that I could help and become an interviewer. So I've been working with several other folks, all veterans, over the last couple of years, participating in that. And some of the stories we hear are just amazing. All of them are amazing. Anyway, this is a great project, and Sue will tell you all about it. I would encourage you, after you hear what she has to say, if you are a veteran or know veterans, talk to them about what you've heard. It's a great way to document the stories that they have. It doesn't matter if they've served a short time, a long time. If you ever put on a uniform and sworn the oath, then you have a story, as Sue says. So without taking away your thunder, Sue, I'll turn it over to you, and thank you so much for joining us. I should also mention that you don't see Sue's picture because she's laid up with a back issue, and she's literally doing this from her sick bed. So we appreciate that very much. So Sue, go ahead. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. And thank you all for coming. I'm always happy to have a chance to talk about the Veterans History Project. So yes, I may be laying on the floor in front of my computer periodically over the course of this, but we're going to try and see how this goes. So let me try to share my screen. And I want to be careful to do, share sound. That's the button I always forget to check. And there we go. So hopefully, can you all still hear?
Okay. It's good, yeah.
Okay. All right, so what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about the Veterans History Project at the Atlanta History Center. And I'm excited to be able to do this and hope our technology holds out and that the sound will continue to work, because it's all about the story. And as John said, I can't tell you how many times I hear people say, I didn't do anything. I never left the country. I served during the Vietnam War, but I never left, I never went to Vietnam, or, I was in the National Guard, or, Merchant Marine or whatever. But John's right. Everybody has a story to tell. And if you don't tell yours, then who will? So this is a project that's been going on at the Atlanta History Center for a number of years. We are a founding partner with the Library of Congress in doing this work. So back in about 2000, along about the time that the movie Saving Private Ryan came out, There was a realization, I think, across the country that we were beginning to lose our World War II veterans. And there was a real push to make sure that we were able to collect and preserve and share those stories. So the Library of Congress, or Congress actually funded the Library of Congress to house these stories. Now, they didn't fund us, they didn't fund anybody else across the country, but they funded the Library of Congress to be able to preserve these stories. And then, of course, the Library of Congress, realizing that they could not do this nationwide work on their own, reached out across the country for partners. And the Atlanta History Center is a founding partner. So we began our partnership with the Library of Congress in 2000 when that legislation was passed. But we've actually been collecting quite a lot longer than that. The oldest interview in the collection that I found so far dates from about 1995. And that was the time when the History Center was beginning to work on an exhibition called V for Victory. And the focus of that exhibition was to document what World War II was like in Georgia, both for civilians and for those in the military. So the focus in the very early days of the project kind of was World War II veterans. But as you can imagine, that focus continues today, but has added urgency, an added sense of urgency, because we feel like we're beginning also to lose our Korean War vets and our Vietnam era vets. And of course, our post 9/11 and Persian Gulf War, our global war on terror veterans have such a different experience than those other veterans did, that we want to make sure that we're documenting those stories as well. So up to this point, since 1995, we've collected about 800. This slide says nearly 800, but I think we've got a few more than that actually in the collection. They are all, well, since I took over in 2012, they are all veteran facilitated. So we partner with two organizations here in Atlanta. One is the Atlanta Vietnam Veterans Business Association, and the other is the Atlanta branch of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. So all of our interviewers tend to be from those two organizations. I do a lot of interviewing, but although we can't document it scientifically, we have a sense that having a veteran on the other side of the camera makes a bit of a difference in the way the interview turns out. So we try to have our veterans conduct the interviews whenever possible. So I've got about 8 fellows from the AVVBA and John. As John mentioned, he's actually an interviewer as well. All of them are Vietnam era veterans, and all but one are combat veterans. And then I've got a couple of folks from ASALA that also do interviews, generally speaking, of people of color, although, you know, that they'll interview anyone. That's kind of the point here, is we are anxious to collect and preserve and share the stories of all of our veterans. The History Center has a long-standing tradition of serious support for veterans. And we're blessed right now to have a CEO. Some of you may know him. Our CEO is Sheffield Hale. And Sheffield has been, you wouldn't find a CEO more supportive of veterans. So there are a number of initiatives that go on at the Atlanta History Center that are veteran focused. The Veterans Park is one of them. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation, along with exhibitions and programs that we do that are based upon our collections, but that seek to honor and shed a spotlight on the service and the sacrifice of our veterans and their families. So the History Center is it's a great organization to be a part of. And don't tell anybody, but I would do this work for free because I love it with all of it is the best job in the world. It truly is. So I wanted to explain a little bit for those of you that might be veterans, and for those of you that have a veteran in mind, know or love a veteran, wanted to explain to you a little bit about kind of how the project goes and what happens over the course of it. So typically before the interview, the whole process starts with someone either approaching us to say, you know, I am a veteran and I would like to share my story, or very often it's a family member. You know, my uncle, my grandfather, you know, my cousin, my husband served, and I would love to, you know, for someone to capture her or his story. What can you do to help us? And so before the interview, what we typically do is we collect a little bit of biographical information from the veteran. And we use a form that is a Library of Congress form. It's a form that they require. But really, it's just an opportunity for us to gather a little bit of biographical information about the veteran so that we can better prepare for the interview. So it's contact information, but it's also what branch did you serve in, what time period, did you serve in a conflict, where did you serve, did you have any, significant experiences you'd like to talk? It's just a chance for us to kind of get to know the veteran before the actual day of the interview. So we send that out, usually via email, but also via snail mail for those of our veterans who don't play well with technology. We totally understand that. That goes out as early as possible with a little bit of information about the program, about the project, and a flyer that describes the project a little more in depth. Once the veteran returns that biographical data form to us completed, then we kind of feel like, okay, this person is ready and serious about doing this. So we'll go ahead and schedule an interview. And we schedule the interview based on the veteran's availability and the availability of his or her interview team. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a little bit. So the interview is scheduled, and then I send a confirmation email or letter to the veteran with the release forms and a pre-interview guide. The pre-interview guide just kind of explains the process, what the camera is going to capture, suggestions on what you might want to wear or might not want to wear. People who never touch their clothes in the course of their day, as soon as you attach a lavalier mic, they're pulling at their shirt and creating problems that way. So we try to suggest the kinds of clothing that you might want to consider, and try to avoid wearing jewelry that might interfere with the mic, things like that. And then the release forms also go out, and we send those out as early as possible. There's a lot that I could say about release forms, and I could probably take up a whole hour just on the ethics of release forms, but suffice it to say that we want to make sure that our veterans have plenty of time to review these forms before they're asked to sign them. There's a form from the Library of Congress. We cannot send interviews to the Library of Congress to preserve without that form. And then there's a form for the Atlanta History Center. We cannot accept an interview into the collection without that form being signed as well. But having said that, that's a very low-key process. Some veterans don't want to sign the form after the interview, and that is absolutely fine. We encourage them to view the interview because they do get a DVD copy. They can have the MP4 of the interview. View the whole interview first, make sure that you're happy with it before you sign the release form. And I will say that I don't care whether they sign it or whether they don't. If something comes up in future where a veteran wants an interview pulled from the collection or restricted in some way, I will do that. The most important thing to me is the trust that we hope we establish with our veterans as custodians of their stories. That's a very personal and, to me, almost a sacred responsibility. And if someone feels that something needs to be pulled or restricted, I am happy to do that no matter what's been signed. Once it goes to the Library of Congress, I've got no control over it, but I am happy to take care of the History Center's end. And we did just have that with a Vietnam veteran very recently. He didn't mind that his interview went up. It had been up for several months, but he ended up having some concerns and wanted it pulled. And so we pulled it, and we have restricted it for 10 years or until after he should pass away. Hopefully that won't happen. But anyway, we did it according to his desires and his requests and suggestions. So the forms are an important part of the process, but I will tell you that I have done interviews where a veteran has decided they don't want their interview to go any further, and I have handed over the SD card and erased it from all of our drives and given it to the veteran. I have equal parts oral history and genealogy, and I'm just so driven, mission driven, to make sure that these stories are preserved, that even if they're only preserved for the veteran's immediate family, I'm happy with that. So that's a little bit about what goes on before the interview. We always encourage our veterans to feel free to bring photographs or other memorabilia if they'd like to share the interview. And those things can actually be brought into the collection as well, but we can talk about that in just a few minutes. So that's before the interview. During the interview, the picture on the left was taken inside our studio. We don't have that backdrop anymore. That black backdrop was a problem for a number of reasons. And we were very lucky to get Turner Broadcasting to very graciously agree to come in and advise us on our studio. So they helped us purchase and install a proper backdrop and proper lighting for the studio. So we like to do the interviews in our studio just because we can control that so much better. We can control the lighting and the sound much better in the studio. But having said that, we understand that travel to the History Center can be problematic for some veterans. And so we have no problem whatsoever in carrying our equipment to the veteran's home or to a child's home, or, you know, however that works. So during the interview, again, if you come to the History Center, it's a professional recording studio. We have an HD camera, beautiful HD camera that does a really good job of both video and audio quality. Again, they're veteran facilitated. And the important part here is the fact that this is the veteran's story to tell. So our interviewers come prepared with questions, but they've been trained. Now, some of them forget that training sometimes, but they have been trained and told very, very carefully, this is the veteran's story. And the best interviews are the interviews where we really don't even hear the interviewer. All we hear is the veteran. So one of my volunteer interviewers, who's amazing, he's probably done more interviews than almost anybody who's been doing this, Tony Hilliard, he put it best. He said, our job as interviewers is just to get them on the freeway. And then once they're on the freeway, we sit back and we shut up. And then when they feel like they've told about everything they want to tell, then our job is to help them find the off-ramp. So I thought that was a great analogy, and that's really kind of what we try to do. Typically, the interview will begin with a question like, you know, tell us a little bit about your background and growing up years. If the veteran doesn't get to it on their own, we'll ask them, how did you get into the military? Did you enlist? Were you drafted? Why did you choose the branch that you chose? You know, how did your family feel about it? And then again, we do try to just kind of sit back. We come prepared with questions so we can ask follow-up questions if necessary, but we try to kind of sit back and let the veteran tell the story exactly the way they'd like to. After the interview, I love this picture of Wiley Verdon, Korean War veteran. The job's not over till the paperwork's done, right? So we do offer those release forms if the veteran is ready to sign them. If not, that's something that can be taken care of later. The interview file is offloaded from the camera to our server, where it remains permanently if we get a release form, or temporarily if the veteran decides not to donate it. But we immediately create a DVD for the veteran to keep or to share. Some veterans don't want DVDs, many of them do. A DVD is an obsolete format, so we do the best we can to provide that, but I will tell you that's kind of an outgoing technology. And we also try to offer the MP4 to the veteran if they'd like it. Some of them are tech savvy and are happy to do that, or their kids or their grandkids are tech savvy. But we can easily send the MP4 of the interview to the veteran for them to keep, and then they can share it in any way that they see fit. They can create more DVDs, they can do whatever they'd like to do with it. With the veteran's permission, their video is shared with the Library of Congress. The Library of Congress will only accept original photographs and documents if the veteran wants to donate those. Some veterans choose to do that to the Veterans History Project in DC. Other veterans prefer to have their material stay here in Atlanta. So we can certainly see about accepting photos and documents and three-dimensional artifacts, which is something the Library of Congress can't take. We're happy to see about taking those or borrowing them and taking high-resolution photographs or high-resolution scans and then returning the originals to the veteran, whatever the veteran likes. The interviews are transcribed. I have one volunteer transcriptionist who is 85 years old, and she does her best, but as you can imagine with COVID, our transcribing has slowed down to a crawl, if not a stop. But ideally, we want all of these interviews transcribed. I'm always looking for funding. I kind of giggle with folks. I am the lone arranger when it comes to these 800 interviews. I'm the only paid staff member, and I have no budget and no staff. So whatever I can do, and when I can find volunteers that are willing to help me, that's a wonderful thing. So Sue, she's Sue as well. She does most of our transcriptions, and I'm hoping to get that back up and running here soon now that the issue around the virus has eased just a little bit. I think we can safely get back into that. The interviews are cataloged and made available on our website, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. When I say catalog, that means you can go on our website and you can search for Battle of Fallujah, Operation Market Garden, D-Day, Idrang Valley, and find all of the interviews where a veteran might maybe have mentioned those topics. You can search by unit, by conflict, by all of those things. And then finally, any associated archival materials or artifacts that the veteran does want to donate to the History Center, those are permanently archived at the History Center as well. Archived and accessioned into our collection. And we're very grateful when veterans agree to do that, because then that gives us the opportunity to create exhibitions, both virtual and brick and mortar exhibitions pertaining to those conflicts. So that's a little bit about the process. I don't think we have any questions yet. I'm just looking at the chat. Now it looks like we're okay so far, so I will keep going. Search the collection. As I mentioned, you can do that online. We've got about 672 interviews that are cataloged and available online right now. The last 128, I am hoping to get online before I retire. I wish I could get them up there faster, but what cataloging means is if you're cataloging, you listen to every single minute of the interview. And what you do when you catalog is you make a list of the places they went to, the unit they were in, the people they talk about, the topics that they talk about. And then that's all fed into this wonderful content management software that we have. And it spits it out into this wonderful website that I'm going to show you here in a minute. So it makes the interviews findable. And if you figure that an average interview lasts anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half, we have some interviews that are much longer than that. And you think about the numbers, you know, doing 128 interviews, that takes a long time. So I'm still working on that, hoping to get the whole collection online within the next year or two. I hope to have them all up there much sooner than that, but that's my drop dead goal. Let me go back just real quickly, because I did want to show you this. So this is what it looks like. You can browse the collection, or again, you can go up here and search. So I'm just going to search for Market Garden and see what happens. So we got 16 interviews that talk about Operation Market Garden in one way, shape, or form. So you can search that way and go through and look and see what else is there. Every interview has a brief description about it. These were the geographic locations where this veteran was, the subjects he talks about. This one doesn't have a whole lot of keywords. We usually end up with lots of keywords too for those terms that don't quite fit into the Library of Congress's nice categories here. And it'll tell you how long the interview. This was a short one. I'm trying to think if this was oh yeah, that's a very short one, which is interesting. Most of them are quite a bit longer than that. So that's what it looks like on the website. And then when you click this button, you can either watch it on our player, or you can, once you click the button, you can go here to YouTube and you can watch the interview on YouTube, you know, whichever way is easiest. So that's kind of what the cataloging does for it. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. And then, as I mentioned, the History Center tries to do as much as we can to honor and talk about our veterans and provide opportunities to share their stories. So our Veterans Park, and this is a perfect time to be talking about this because, of course, Veterans Day is on Thursday. We have a Veterans Day ceremony every year on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. It is always at 11 o'clock on November 11th. The only time that varied was, I think, last year or year before last, the major Veterans Day parade was on that day. It happened to be a Saturday, and I think we ended up doing our Veterans Day ceremony either the day before or the day after. But typically it is on the 11th of November at 11 o'clock. They're very careful to keep it just under 1 hour, which is perfect. You've got great music. This is a photograph, I think, from 2019. Last year, of course, our Veterans Day ceremony was virtual because we couldn't gather in person. But this year it will be in person and virtual both. And so on the Veterans Park, where this event is held every year, we have these interpretive panels. This is the only picture I could find of the ceremony that included one of the panels, but there are 6 of these scattered around the park. And these are being replaced tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock. They're a little bit outdated. And I wanted to show you what they actually look like. So this is what the new panels are going to look like. There'll be 6 of them. Each panel has a photograph and 2 quotes from the collection. And then there's a QR code. And so if you put your phone over that QR code, it will take you directly to our new Veteran Voices website where you can listen to clips from the collection. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a second here too. So let me get back to where I was. So I'll show you what that looks like in just a second as well. This is the page, Veterans History Project page. Whoops. And if you click on that, that's going to take you right here to the History Project page. The first link would be the Search the Collection link, and that will take you to our album page where all of this content is. Let me go back to my presentation because I've already lost it. There we go. And then the next link is what I kind of wanted to talk about today. Let me go down the page just a little bit. So in addition to the links I'm going to talk about, there are also several videos that we've done over the years to commemorate different events. So this one we did to commemorate Pearl Harbor. This one has to do with D-Day. And then this was a Veterans Day film that we did not too long ago. So I'll just let this play for a minute. Are we okay for time, Kevin? We good on time? Okay.
Yes.
Soldiers do what they do out of a selflessness and a willingness to give without hope of reward. They do it for their family, they do it for their country, but most of all, what I found is they do it for each other. The man on the left, the man on the right.
You know, they always say your life flashes in front of you and stuff. I really didn't have that, but I definitely was like, okay, this is it for me. This is where my life ends. I'm going to die here, you know, face down on the ground in Iraq. And about the time those emotions and those thoughts were coming over my body, I could hear my guys yelling for me. Before I knew it, they were hitting me with that fire extinguisher. And I don't think I'll ever probably find the words to describe that feeling of that cooling sensation and the relief it provided me, like almost instantly. But then it also gave me that, you know, that emotional kind of aspect where, okay, maybe I'm not going to die here on the ground. That if they got to me and I feel like this right now, then maybe I still have a fighting chance to go on.
While I was sitting at the desk, this guy came up. He had an Air Force cap on. He looked as old as I did. And he related to me how on a mission to Vienna, an outfit of Red Tails, Tuskegee Airmen in the area, 2 of them came over and sat in on each side of him and escorted him all the way back home safely. And he asked me, were you in that outfit? And I said, yes, I was. The guy started to cry. And he went on to say, if it hadn't been for you guys, I wouldn't be sitting here. He said, because we'd have been shot down for sure. And as a result of you having gotten us home safely, I've had children and grandchildren. My family owes you men our past, our present, and our future. But I started to cry.
Everybody who goes over there comes home a little different. What really kind of bothers me is when I go in public, I could have 3 veterans with me. You know, two might be suffering from, you know, post-traumatic stress. One could have a TBI, a traumatic brain injury, and then there's me. And the only one they'll think is me. And they just forget about these guys. But those guys' service is no different than mine. You know, and I have, you know, guys that have multiple deployments always coming up to me and saying, my service isn't quite the same. It isn't like yours. No, your service is the same as mine. I had one bad day which changed, you know, this part of me, but the actual service, serving your country, is no different.
I believe that what I would like for people to remember is that the freedoms that we enjoy today did not come about by accident, that they were bought and paid for. I believe that free societies from time to time need reminders that their freedoms are rooted in the past. America and of today didn't happen by accident.
I'm very proud of the fact that I have served my country. It was the best learning experience I ever had. The only thing I would hope and pray is that our people, our citizens, go up and say thank you for your service.
So that's the kind of thing that we're able to do.
Hey,
with
Sue.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, Sue, this is Ben. Could I throw a couple questions at you?
Please.
Okay. So one, this is amazing. I don't if you're doing this like on your back part of the time, you're doing more than I could ever do on my feet with 10 people. So this is awesome. I love it. Again, some really basic questions that I'm a little slow sometimes is, so Atlanta History Center, are you capturing, do they have any nexus? So I understand the Emory component, but are these veterans any nexus to Atlanta outside of the Emory, or are you doing any veterans?
We do any veteran. We
any
do
veterans.
any
Okay.
veteran. Now, having said that, theoretically, my collections development committee would be all over me if they knew I was saying this, but theoretically, the veteran needs to have some kind of a tie to Atlanta because we are the Atlanta History Center.
Okay.
So, you know, Metro
Sure,
Atlanta,
makes
but I've
sense.
gone as far south as Moultrie.
Yeah.
I've gone over to Columbus. I've gone in other places. It's also, though, a nationwide program. So I have had people come through at events and such who've said, you know, my uncle lives in Phoenix. Well, send me an email and I'll find somebody in Phoenix who's doing the same work. Yeah. Does that help?
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, that absolutely. Then can you go back to that page where you had, it was like the veterans story and the YouTube video, and then you kind of described like geographically where they were. It was all cataloged.
Yes.
Please.
Absolutely. This one?
Nice. Yeah, this is amazing. So what happens when you click on like, okay, like World War, maybe it's World War I, 39 to 45 personal, like, are these all clickable links? What are they in the blue?
They are. I wish I could tell you they're helpful clickable links. Unfortunately, they're not. These
Okay.
are they're Library of Congress subject terms that we use. So the next level,
Gotcha.
I will tell you this, the next level, if I can ever get a staff and some money, the next level is to OHMS these interviews. OHMS. It's the Oral History Metadata Synchronizer. And with that technology, when you're here, you've got a transcript over here. You can click on the transcript and it will take you, say you find him talking about Mormon Legrand.
Oh, yeah.
Click on, it'll take you to the moment in the interview where he says that. You
Awesome.
can also map
Okay.
natural language. So for example, you know, you've got an African-American World War II guy who's talking about the fact that prisoners of war could go to the base movie theater, but he couldn't. He may never say discrimination or segregation in his interview, so you would never find it in a transcript, but you can map that segment of the interview and say segregation and discrimination. And again, click right on that link and go right to that moment. So that's what I'm hoping for someday before I die.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing. And what you have done already is phenomenal. So thank you for your work. This is great. I'm gonna I want to show my daughters this. This is just awesome. So thank you.
Oh, you bet. Thank you. I was just going to show you veteran voices here really quickly. So let me go back to the, see where I am from current slide. Okay. So if you were to click on veteran voices, again, you've got the choice to search the full collection, like we were just showing you pictures of now, or you can go to our new veteran voices, and this is brand spanking new. We just put this together last week. If I click on Hear Their Stories, it will take me to this online exhibition that talks about the Veterans History Project, why we do it, what it's about. There's photographs here. If I'm interested in life in uniform or combat stories or stories about the home front, stories about prisoners of war or missing in action or those who were killed in action, stories about why veterans serve. I can click on any of those links and it will take me to a playlist. There's Joe again, love Joe Galloway. It'll take me to a YouTube playlist that we are continually populating. Now, this one's only got 5 clips on it right now, but it will ultimately have hundreds. And these are all clips where veterans talk about why they do what they do. So Veteran Voices, we are really excited about this. There's so much great content in here. Here's another great clip. If I've got time, I thought maybe I'd share one more for you. One more with you. Many of us have heard stories about our Vietnam veterans returning, and this is a great clip. Milton Jones was in the United States Marine Corps, and he talks about his experience coming back after having served his year in Vietnam.
And we land, several of us, again, traveling individually. I don't know these guys. Several of us get off the plane, again, another Continental Airlines charter with flight attendants, the whole kit and caboodle. We land at Travis Air Force Base. We get off the plane. We're so thankful to be back in the world, the good old US of A. We get off the plane, we kiss the runway, kneel down and kiss the runway. I'm home, I'm back in the world, everything's gonna be great. A few hours later, after processing out, we walk off the base, along comes a hippie bus, they throw crap, feces, whatever else out on us, call us all sorts of names, and it's like, okay, how can I fit this experience into the feelings that I was just expressing? And I couldn't.
Of course, 9/11 happened while I was stationed there. I was on a mission that day.
That's another great story. Brian Stone talking about flying an AWACS plane on 9/11. So we're really excited about this Veteran Voices online. Much as I would love for people to listen to the full interview, because you ought to listen to the full interviews, we don't have that time. Nobody has that kind of time. So this is kind of a curated experience where we're trying to pick representative stories from these amazing interviews, and in the hopes that people can use them. Now, I'm a recovering middle school teacher, and I would have given anything to have had this when I was in the classroom. When I taught 8th grade social studies just a few years ago in Henry County, I was required to get from the Paleo Indian period to the Clinton administration in a single academic year. And so you can imagine how much time you're able to spend talking about military history and the conflicts that have shaped this nation. And these interviews are so great because they encapsulate what that firsthand experience was like. These are firsthand accounts of what it was like to be there and how military service has informed the lives of these men and women as they've gone forward. So we're really excited about this. Like I said, that just went live. You can access it through the website, or you can access it through Veterans Park. If you happen to be there, the QR codes on the panels will get you there, but you can also get to it through our website. And then we do exhibitions and programming based upon our content. This is a picture from a brick and mortar exhibit we had on Vietnam back in 2017. It ran from Veterans Day in 2017 through about March of 2018. It was called More Than Self, Living the Vietnam War. And it was based entirely on the interviews in our collection and the artifacts and photos and documents that our Vietnam veterans had donated to accompany their interviews. When it closed in March of November 18th, we converted as much of it as we could to an online exhibit. This is one of my favorite photographs from it. We're so grateful for these photos and documents because some of them are just extraordinary. And then this is a picture from the opening event, but this is what the exhibit looks like online. So similar to Veteran Voices, you've got background information about the exhibit, and then you've got these different chapters that you can visit. So these are the 6 themes that tend to come out in most interviews about Vietnam, the experience of Vietnam. So that's how that one works. And finally, I don't know if we've got any questions up to this point. Should I go on or pause for a minute? Okay. For those of you, again, who might maybe be veterans, I I'm really good at guilt. I'm a grandmother, so I'm excellent at guilt. I can really lay on the guilt. And typically this is the kind of presentation that I would do for veterans groups as well. It's very personal for me. I got a couple of pictures here. This is my grandfather, Logan Shutt. He served in World War II in the Army in the Pacific. And then after World War II, he was a career Army man. He served until the 1950s when he retired. Family lore has it that my grandmother was the last civilian out on aircraft out of Berlin before the Berlin Wall fell, or before the Iron Curtain came down. He was an amazing guy and did amazing things, but everything I know about his service, and I mean everything I know about his service, I have learned since he passed away in 1989. I didn't know anything. Kathy, question?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was wondering, and you may have said this, where is Veterans Park? Is it on your property at the History Center or somewhere else?
It is on our property at the History Center. It is right in front of the Cyclorama building. It's right, at the northeast corner.
The Cyclorama, so I guess I missed it somehow. So thank you though. Thank you. This is a wonderful presentation.
Sure, absolutely. The next picture I wanted to show you right quick. This is my dad. My dad was in the 8th Air Force during World War II. Same thing. He always said I never did anything, wouldn't talk about his military experience. Everything I've learned about his military experience, I've learned since he passed away, including the film that has surfaced on YouTube that I never knew about. The film that he took of the rescue of 3 Dutch resistance fighters during World War II as part of the 8th Air Force's air sea rescue efforts. I never knew any of that. I've learned all of it since he passed away. And this last picture is my husband, Randy Verhoff. He was an intelligence officer in the United States Navy during the Persian Gulf War, and before and after. He was the one who always said Navy intelligence was an oxymoron, and that the Navy was 300 years of tradition unhampered by progress. Those are always two quotes I enjoy sharing with veterans because they can certainly relate. I lived through this with him. I lived through his military experience, but I still know almost nothing about it. And when he passed away in 2002, all of that knowledge went with him. So if you don't want to do it for yourself, you need to be doing it for your family members. For extended family members, for cousins, for children. This is my dad and me when I was a baby, 1956. This is my husband and our 3 oldest kids in Rota, Spain, when we were stationed there. Do it for your family, and do it for those poor teachers in the classroom who desperately want to teach the truth about military service and the nuanced and complicated conflicts that this country has been in from its inception to the present day, why veterans are willing to serve, and what that experience is like and how it changes them. So if you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for them. And that's all I've got for you, but I am certainly available for questions.
Sue, I'm a Navy intelligence officer, so I can understand your former husband's sentiment. It's awesome.
Bravo, Zulu.
That's awesome. Thanks.
I submitted, good afternoon, this is Vanetta Daniels. I'm actually part of the Emory Veterans Network. And so if we are veterans that would like to participate and know other veterans in the metro area, and I think I submitted a question in the chat about this, what is the process? And I'm sorry, I was going from one meeting to another, so I apologize if I missed that early in the presentation. But what is the process to either sign up to do it ourselves or recommend other veterans who we think would be awesome to have their stories told?
Bless you a million billion, Vanetta. I am so glad you asked that. I am popping my email address and my phone number in the chat. And all you need to do is just get a hold of me. I'm trying to make sure I spelled it right because, again, drugs, right? Yeah, that looks good. Just shoot me an email or a telephone call. The process begins with an email or a letter, whatever's easier for you or the veteran. With that biographical data form, a little bit of background info about the project, that's what kind of gets the ball rolling. And then once we have that bio data form back, we will go ahead and set up interviews. Quick word about COVID. All of my interviewers are vaccinated. Some folks are, a little nervous about being in an enclosed space like the studio. We can work around that. We have a beautiful large library in the same building that I work in that's only open Tuesday through Saturday. So I have been known to set up interviews in the library on Sundays and Mondays when the library is closed, because in there we can be literally, I've got my lavalier cords, each have about 6 foot of cable on them. So we can be about 12 feet apart if we need to be. So we certainly understand hesitancy surrounding gathering in enclosed spaces or gathering at all during this time period. And we will do whatever we can to make the veteran comfortable, or wait, until the veteran's comfortable.
Hey, Sue, this is John. I want to make a comment. I really appreciate what you said about doing this for others, because my wife and I were not married when I was in the service, and she's found out a lot about what I did by what I said in the interview, not what I've said to her offline. So, and for my kids and my grandkids, they may not care much now, but I think they will at some point. So please do encourage veterans who you know, or if you are a veteran, do one. They're painless. We're really nice people who do the interviewing, and it's a good thing to have. So thank you, Sue.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that testimonial. I'd give anything to have my grandfather or my dad or my husband on camera talking about their experiences. I have a lot of veterans who will say, yeah, well, I wrote a memoir. Well, that's great. And please do that. But there's something very powerful about hearing the voice and seeing the facial expressions. So yeah, it's a great thing.
What type of volunteers do you need that are not, who are not veterans?
I would love to have a few more folks working on transcripts. We have a software program that the software developer is really nice and happy to transfer licenses from one to the other. It's the kind of work that's not for everybody. It's pretty, there's a lot of attention to detail, and you do have to listen to the whole interview. And so it's a little bit time consuming, but I would love to have folks that might maybe be willing to work on transcribing. I would love if I could find somebody who is really tech savvy, somebody who might maybe be willing to work on indexing these interviews, because the ohms that I mentioned that will let you, drill down right to the moment that a veteran says something. Oh, thank you, Ben. Thanks for being here. That's free open source software. We've already got that going. We just don't have the manpower to to do that. But I'd love to have that capability for all of the interviews in our collection.
So this is Vanette again. I was going to see, I see Davis is on. I think that would be a great opportunity for Emory has a volunteer, Emory, the alum, or even the students have Emory Volunteer Network. And I know Georgia Tech has one as well. And during COVID, because a lot of volunteer opportunities have been restricted for students, even prospective students who are trying to get into college and they want volunteer opportunities, there's really a huge limitation on volunteer opportunities that are virtual. So I can shoot you an email and connect you, as can Davis, to Emory's volunteer network, but I know Georgia State has one as well as Georgia Tech. And of course, younger people are often very tech savvy in those kind of ways.
Oh, Vanetta, that would be wonderful. Because yeah, that's one big advantage to OHMS. It can all be done from a student's computer. All they need is a good internet connection, and they're up and running. So thank you for that. I would love to have that connection. That would be wonderful.
Okay, are there any more questions? If not, I'm going to turn it over to John to close our program, please.
Sue, thank you again for doing this, especially in your current state. And we hope you feel better. And thanks again for all the time you've spent at this and your obvious dedication to it and your passion for the project. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Great presentation. You presented a lot of thoughts, things for us to think about and remember.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.